The fluorescent lights of the Harlem Burger Haven flickered, casting jagged shadows across the counter where Marcus Tate stood, his polished loafers out of place against the greasy linoleum. At 32, Marcus was a black man who'd clawed his way from a cramped Brooklyn apartment to the CEO's office of his own fast food empire, a chain that promised community in every bite. Tonight, though, as he stood unrecognized in his own restaurant, he was just another customer about to be broken. "Yo, you deaf or what?" The cashier, a wiry 20-something with a name tag reading Jake, sneered at Marcus. "I said we don't serve your kind after hours." The words hit like a slap, sharp and deliberate, laced with a venom Marcus hadn't heard since his childhood in Bed-Stuy, where slurs were slung like stones. Around him, the late-night crowd, mostly young, mostly white, snickered, their eyes darting between Marcus and the cashier. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "I ordered a burger. It's 9:58. You close at 10. He pointed to the glowing menu board, its prices a testament to his vision. Affordable food for neighborhoods like this one, where dreams were often starved before they could grow. Jake leaned forward, his smirk twisting. "Look, man, I don't care who you think you are. You're not getting served. Go back to wherever you came from." The crowd's laughter swelled, and Marcus felt the weight of every eye, every whispered judgment. He was the CEO of Harlem Burger Haven, the man who'd built 47 locations across the Northeast, yet here, in his own store, he was nothing. He left without a word, the bell above the door jingling mockingly as he stepped into the cold October night. But Marcus wasn't defeated. He'd learned long ago that silence could be louder than rage, and he'd returned to prove it. The next morning, Marcus sat in his Manhattan office, the city skyline sprawling beyond his floor-to-ceiling windows. His desk, a sleek slab of mahogany, held a single photo. Him and Javier Morales, his partner of 3 years, laughing at a street fair in Queens. Javier, a 30-year-old community organizer with warm brown eyes and a smile that could thaw the coldest hearts, was the reason Marcus kept fighting. They'd met at a fundraiser for queer youth, where Javier's passion for justice had ignited something in Marcus he hadn't known was there. Now, as Marcus stared at the photo, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Javier. "Heard what happened last night. You okay?" Marcus's fingers hovered over the keys. He wanted to say he was fine, that the humiliation at Store 23 was just a blip. But the truth gnawed at him. Last night wasn't just about him. It was about every person who'd ever been made to feel small, every community his restaurants were supposed to uplift. He typed back, "Not okay yet, but I will be." By noon, Marcus was in a meeting with his executive team, a diverse group he'd handpicked to reflect the communities they served. There was Aisha, his CFO, a 40-year-old Muslim woman whose sharp mind had saved them from financial ruin in their early days. Then there was Liam, the 28-year-old head of operations, a trans man whose quiet competence kept the chain running smoothly. They listened as Marcus recounted the incident, his voice calm but laced with steel. "This isn't just about me," he said, leaning forward. "It's about what we stand for. Harlem Burger Haven isn't just a business. It's a promise. And if our own employees are breaking that promise, we've got work to do." Aisha nodded, her hijab catching the light. "We need to investigate. If this is systemic, we're failing our mission." Liam scribbled notes. "I'll pull the employee records for Store 23. We'll start with Jake." Marcus's mind was already racing ahead. He didn't just want Jake fired, he wanted change. Real change. The kind that would ripple through every store, every community. But first, he needed to understand how deep the rot went. That evening, Marcus drove to Jersey City, where Javier was speaking at a community center. The room was packed, mostly with queer teens of color, their faces alight as Javier talked about resilience. Marcus slipped into the back, watching his partner move with a grace that made his heart ache. Javier spotted him and grinned, wrapping up his speech before joining Marcus in the hallway. "You didn't tell me it was that bad," Javier said, his voice low, his hand brushing Marcus's. "Why didn't you call me?" Marcus shrugged, his throat tight. "Didn't want to burden you. You're out here saving the world." Javier's eyes softened. "You're my world, Marcus. And what happened last night? That's not just your fight. It's ours." They stood there, the hum of the community center fading into the background. Marcus felt the weight of Javier's words, the quiet strength that had always anchored him. He knew then that whatever came next, they'd face it together. By the end of the week, Marcus had a plan. He'd go undercover, posing as a new hire at Store 23. No one there knew his face. His rise to CEO had been swift, and he'd always prioritized the work over the spotlight. If the problem was bigger than one rogue cashier, he'd see it firsthand. He met with Liam to finalize the details. "You sure about this?" Liam asked, adjusting his glasses. "If they find out who you are, it could get messy." "It's already messy," Marcus replied. "I need to know what's happening on the ground. Not just reports, reality." Liam nodded, pulling up a fake employee profile. Marcus Tate, CEO, became Marcus Thompson, a 32-year-old shift worker with a vague backstory. By Monday, he'd be flipping burgers, mopping floors, and watching. Always watching. As he left the office, Marcus felt a spark of hope. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for the kid he'd been, the one who'd hidden his truth for years, afraid of what the world would do to a black queer man with dreams too big for his circumstances. He was fighting for Javier, for the kids at the community center, for every person who'd ever been told they didn't belong. And he'd do it in silence until the moment was right. Monday morning at Store 23 smelled of fryer grease and desperation. Marcus, now Marcus Thompson, stood behind the counter in a stiff polyester uniform, his CEO title buried beneath a fake name tag. At 32, he was older than most of the crew, who were barely out of their teens, their banter sharp and careless. The Harlem Burger Haven was busy, its neon sign buzzing as customers poured in. Families, workers, kids from the nearby high school. Marcus watched it all, his hands moving mechanically to assemble burgers while his eyes tracked every interaction. Jake, the cashier from that night, was still here, his smirk unchanged. He barked orders at the crew, his voice dripping with authority he hadn't earned. Marcus noticed how Jake's tone shifted depending on who stood at the counter. White customers got smiles. Anyone else, especially Black or Latino, got clipped words or outright hostility. It wasn't just Marcus he'd targeted. It was a pattern. During a lull, Marcus leaned against the counter, wiping it down as he listened to the crew's chatter. A young Black woman, maybe 19, with braids and a name tag reading Talia, muttered under her breath about Jake's attitude problem. Marcus seized the chance. "Jake always like that?" he asked, keeping his tone casual. Talia glanced around, then nodded. "Worse some days. Thinks he runs the place. Manager lets him get away with it, too." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Manager? Karen," Talia said, rolling her eyes. "She's in the back half the time on her phone. Doesn't care what Jake does as long as the register balances." Marcus filed that away. Karen, the store manager, was supposed to enforce the company's values. diversity, inclusion, community. If she was complicit, the problem was bigger than one bad cashier. He needed proof. That afternoon, Marcus saw his chance. A Latino family, 2 parents and a young girl, approached the counter. Jake's smile vanished as he took their order, his tone sharp. When the father asked for extra ketchup, Jake tossed the packets onto the counter, letting them scatter. The girl flinched, and Marcus's stomach twisted. He stepped in, handing the family their tray with a warm smile. "Here you go. Enjoy." The father nodded, grateful, but Jake shot Marcus a glare. "You trying to do my job, newbie?" "Just helping out," Marcus said evenly, holding Jake's gaze. He saw the challenge there, the same cruelty he'd faced a week ago. But he didn't react. Not yet. That evening, Marcus met Javier at their favorite diner in Queens, a cozy spot with cracked vinyl booths and the best milkshakes in the city. Javier slid into the booth across from him, his brown eyes searching Marcus's face. "You look exhausted," he said, reaching for Marcus's hand. "How was day 1? Marcus sighed, the weight of the day settling into his bones. "It's worse than I thought. Jake's not the only problem. The managers checked out, and the crew's scared to speak up. I saw him hassle a family today. Kid, Javi. A little girl." Javier's jaw tightened. "That's not what your restaurants are supposed to be." "I know," Marcus said, his voice low. "I built this chain to lift people up, not tear them down. But somewhere along the way, I let it slip." Javier squeezed his hand. "You didn't let anything slip. You're fixing it. That's what matters." Marcus managed a small smile, but doubt gnawed at him. What if he couldn't fix it? What if the dream he'd poured his life into was already broken? Over the next few days, Marcus blended into the crew, his CEO instincts sharpened by years of reading people. He noticed the small things. Talia's quiet defiance when Jake snapped at her. The way another worker, a shy 18-year-old named Diego, avoided eye contact with customers of color. Diego, Marcus learned, was queer, his rainbow bracelet tucked under his sleeve like a secret. Marcus recognized that fear. It was the same one he'd carried at Diego's age, hiding who he was to survive. One night, as they closed up, Marcus lingered near Diego, wiping down the fry station. "Tough shift, huh?" he said, keeping his tone light. Diego shrugged, his eyes on the floor. "Yeah, Jake's been on my case all week." "He's on everyone's case," Marcus said. "But you seem, I don't know, like you're carrying something heavier." Diego froze, then glanced at Marcus, his expression wary. After a moment, he pulled up his sleeve, revealing the bracelet. "Jake saw this yesterday, called me a slur, said I should keep it hidden if I want to keep my job." Marcus's blood ran hot, but he kept his face neutral. "That's not right. You shouldn't have to hide who you are." Diego's eyes glistened. "Yeah, well, try telling that to Karen. She heard him and didn't say a word." Marcus nodded, his mind racing. Jake wasn't just a problem, he was a symptom. Karen's inaction was the real failure. He needed evidence, something concrete to take to his board. He started carrying a small notebook, jotting down every incident, every slur, every time Jake or Karen let hate slide. By Friday, Marcus had enough to act. He documented Jake's behavior, Karen's negligence, and the crew's fear. But he needed one more piece, proof that this wasn't just Store 23. He called Aisha, asking her to pull data from other locations, customer complaints, employee turnover, anything that might show a pattern. She promised results by Monday. That night, Marcus and Javier walked through Central Park, the autumn leaves crunching under their feet. The air was crisp, and Javier's hand was warm in his. "You're doing something big," Javier said, his voice soft but firm. "But you're carrying it all alone. Let me help." Marcus stopped, turning to face him. The park was quiet, the city's hum a distant pulse. "You already are," he said, his voice thick. "Just being you, believing in me." Javier stepped closer, their foreheads touching. "I believe in us," he whispered, "and I believe in what you're fighting for." In that moment, Marcus felt the weight lift, if only a little. He wasn't alone, and he wasn't done. Monday brought a storm. Aisha's data revealed what Marcus had feared. Store 23 wasn't an outlier. Customer complaints about discrimination, racial, homophobic, transphobic, spiked at 6 other locations, all managed by people Karen had trained. Turnover was high, especially among queer employees and employees of color. The numbers painted a picture of a company drifting from its mission, and Marcus felt the sting of responsibility. He'd been so focused on growth, on numbers, that he'd missed the cracks forming beneath. He sat in his car outside Store 23, his fake name tag pinned to his chest. Today he'd confront Karen. Not as Marcus Thompson, but as Marcus Tate, CEO. He'd called Liam to have security on standby, just in case. But first, he needed to see one last shift through to confirm what he already knew. Inside, the lunch rush was chaos. Jake was at the register, his usual sneer in place, while Karen lounged in the back office, her laughter audible through the thin walls. Marcus worked the grill, his hands steady but his mind racing. He overheard Jake muttering slurs under his breath as a black couple ordered. Saw Talia's shoulders tense as she cleaned tables nearby. Diego, meanwhile, was nowhere to be seen. He'd called out sick, and Marcus suspected it wasn't a coincidence. When the rush died down, Marcus approached Karen's office, his heart pounding. He knocked once, then entered. Karen, a middle-aged white woman with a perpetually bored expression, looked up from her phone. "What do you want, Thompson?" "I need to talk to you about Jake," Marcus said, his voice calm but firm. "He's been targeting customers and staff. It's not just unprofessional. It's against everything this company stands for." Karen rolled her eyes. "Jake's a good worker. Customers love him. You're new, so maybe you don't get how things work around here." "I get it better than you think," Marcus said, his tone sharpening. "I've seen the complaints. I've heard the slurs. And I know you've done nothing about it." Karen stood, her face reddening. "Who do you think you are, talking to me like that? You're just a grunt. Get back to the grill." Marcus pulled off his name tag, revealing the embroidered initials on his shirt, MT, Marcus Tate. "I'm not a grunt," he said quietly. "I'm the CEO, and you're done here." Karen's mouth fell open, but before she could respond, Marcus turned and walked out. He didn't need her excuses. He needed action. That evening, Marcus met with his board in a sleek midtown conference room. Aisha and Liam flanked him, their faces grim as they presented the data. The board, mostly older, mostly white, shifted uncomfortably as Marcus laid out the truth. Their company was failing its employees and customers. He didn't sugarcoat his own role. "I let this happen," he said. "I trusted the wrong people to carry our vision. But I'm fixing it, starting now." He outlined his plan. Immediate termination for Karen and Jake, mandatory retraining for all managers, and a new oversight team to monitor inclusivity. He also proposed a community fund, seeded with his own money, to support queer youth and communities of color in the neighborhoods their restaurants served. The board hesitated, citing costs, but Marcus didn't back down. "This isn't about profit," he said. "It's about purpose." By the end of the meeting, he had their approval. But the victory felt hollow. He needed to see Javier to ground himself in something real. They met at their spot in Central Park, the same bench where they'd shared countless moments. Javier was waiting, his jacket pulled tight against the chill. "You did it," he said, his smile proud but cautious. "So why do you look like you're still fighting?" Marcus sat beside him, the bench creaking under his weight. "Because it's not enough. Firing people, changing policies, it's a start, but it doesn't erase what happened. To me, to Diego, to that family." Javier took his hand, his touch steadying. "You can't erase the past, but you can build a better future. You're already doing it." Marcus looked at him, the city lights reflecting in Javier's eyes. "I don't know if I'm enough," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "You are," Javier said fiercely. "And when you doubt it, I'll be here to remind you." They sat in silence, the weight of the fight settling between them. Marcus knew the road ahead was long, but with Javier by his side, he felt ready. The next morning, Marcus returned to Store 23, this time as himself. The crew froze when he walked in, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the uniform he'd worn days before. Talia's eyes widened, and a murmur rippled through the staff. Jake was already gone, fired that morning along with Karen. Marcus had sent a company-wide memo announcing the changes, but he wanted to deliver this message in person. He gathered the crew in the dining area. The restaurant closed for the day. "I'm Marcus Tate," he began, his voice steady. "I built Harlem Burger Haven to be a place where everyone belongs. I failed you. I let people like Jake and Karen turn this store into something it was never meant to be." The crew exchanged glances, some wary, some curious. Talia stood with her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Marcus continued, "I'm here to make it right. Starting today, we're retraining everyone. We're creating a safe space for you to speak up. No fear of retaliation. And I'm personally funding a community program to support queer youth and people of color in Harlem." A hand went up. Diego, back from his sick day, his rainbow bracelet visible. "Why should we trust you?" he asked, his voice trembling but defiant. "You're the boss. You let this happen." Marcus nodded, the question cutting deep. "You're right. I wasn't paying close enough attention. But I'm here now and I'm listening. Tell me what you need." Diego hesitated, then spoke. "We need managers who care. We need to know we won't get punished for being ourselves." Others chimed in, Talia about fair scheduling, another worker about better training. Marcus listened, taking notes, his heart swelling with their honesty. This was what he'd built the company for. Real people, real voices. Over the next week, Marcus threw himself into the changes. He hired a new manager for Store 23, a black queer woman named Simone who'd worked her way up from a cashier at another location. He met with community leaders, including Javier, to shape the new fund. And he spent evenings with Diego and Talia, learning their stories, their hopes. Diego wanted to study graphic design. Talia dreamed of opening her own restaurant. Marcus saw himself in them, and it fueled his resolve. But the fight wasn't over. Social media buzzed with rumors about Harlem Burger Haven, some praising the changes, others calling Marcus a woke sellout. A local news outlet ran a story about his undercover stint, framing it as a publicity stunt. Marcus ignored the noise, but Javier didn't. "They don't get it," Javier said one night, pacing their apartment. "You're not doing this for clout. You're doing it because it's right." Marcus pulled him close, their foreheads touching. "Let them talk. We know the truth." Javier's eyes softened, but his voice was fierce. I'm proud of you, but I'm scared too. This fight's bigger than one store. I know, Marcus said. That's why I'm not stopping. By the end of the month, the changes were taking root. Customer complaints dropped, and employee morale at Store 23 improved. Simone was a natural leader, calling out issues before they escalated. Marcus visited often, no longer undercover, his presence a reminder that the CEO was watching but also listening. One evening, as he locked up with Simone, she turned to him. You didn't have to do this, you know? Put yourself out there like that. Marcus smiled faintly. Yeah, I did. For me. For you. For everyone who walks through that door. Simone nodded, her eyes bright. You're all right, boss. As he walked into the night, Marcus felt a flicker of peace. The fight wasn't over, but he was on the right path. 6 months later, Harlem Burger Haven was unrecognizable. The community fund had launched, supporting queer youth programs and small businesses in Harlem, Bed-Stuy, and beyond. Marcus's retraining program rolled out across all 47 locations, with Simone leading the charge as the new regional manager. Customer reviews glowed, and employee turnover plummeted. The chain wasn't just a business anymore, it was a beacon. Marcus stood in the same Harlem park where he and Javier had shared so many moments, the wooden bench now a familiar landmark. The carved inscription, "Love triumphs over hate," had been restored, its letters sharp and proud. Today, they were hosting a community event, a celebration of the fund's launch. Kids ran through the grass, their laughter mingling with the music from a local band. Talia was there, helping with catering, her smile brighter than Marcus had ever seen. Diego, too, was present, showing off a portfolio of designs he'd created with a scholarship from the fund. Javier stood beside Marcus, his hand slipping into his. Look at this, Javier said, gesturing to the crowd. You did this. We did this, Marcus corrected, his voice thick with emotion. I couldn't have done it without you. Javier grinned, pulling him close. Don't get all sappy on me now, Tate. Marcus laughed, the sound freer than it had been in months. The humiliation at Store 23 felt like a lifetime ago, but it had changed him. It had reminded him why he'd started Harlem Burger Haven, why he'd fought so hard to build something bigger than himself. He'd been humbled, but he'd risen, not with loud vengeance, but with quiet, relentless justice. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the park, Marcus looked out at the faces around him. Black, Latino, queer, straight, young, old. This was his community, his home, and for the first time in a long time he felt like he belonged. The event wound down, but Marcus and Javier lingered, sitting on the bench, their shoulders touching. What's next? Javier asked, his voice soft. Marcus looked at him, the man who'd been his anchor through it all. More, he said simply. More love, more justice, more us. Javier smiled, his eyes shining. I like the sound of that. And as the stars emerged above the city, Marcus knew they'd face whatever came next, together.